Hey, encouragers. Whoa. Now, this is uncharted territory. So I pre-recorded this podcast at a time when we weren't experiencing the COVID-19 virus. So as you listen, take what you can from the recording, but remind yourself this too will pass. There are sunny days ahead. And there are some standard truths in the podcast that you can gather strength, knowledge, and some momentum on. I also encourage you to listen to all the past 100 plus episodes that have great nuggets of how to work from home, set some achievable goals right now, and get through this together. Remember in everything you do for the next couple of months to breathe both grace and forgiveness in the same breath. We will need both of them. Breathe out grace and forgiveness, all within the same breath. We'll need both with ourselves and with our families and friends. My next series, I will break down what the virus has meant for both my businesses and do some writing with how I can help you stay encouraged. Remember, encouragers, we got this. Hello, encouragers. I'm Rebecca Scott, wife, mother of 4, author, and owner and designer of Rebecca Scott Designs. I'm here to encourage you, to make you feel that I can do this spirit each and every day of our awesome journeys to fulfill those many important roles. I believe we are fully equipped to execute, and I will provide you with as much knowledge and practices and systems as I can to help you understand just what I know you can do. Execute. We got this. Hello, encouragers. On the podcast today, I've got a fun guest, and I spent the majority of my Christmas break reading her book, which in one respect is pretty amazing because I almost always listen to audio versions of books, and I pretty much only read self-development, self-help books. Every once in a while, I will read something else, but there was something about her cover and everything that I had to read this book. She has me as a guest on her podcast, and then she sent me her book, and I thought, oh, this would be a perfect read. And I ended up laughing, and it wasn't just, forgive me, Rebecca, as I introduce you here, I don't mean just self-development, because I learned so much about you and how to do things, but I also learned about, oh my goodness, how relatable you are and how relatable the story is to all of us and how important it is to connect to our roots and stay true to who we are. So that is a basic recap, but you guys have got to read the book and we will talk about it here throughout the podcast. But it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience for reading a good book that wasn't the audio version. So everybody, I'd like you to meet.
My goodness.
I printed this little part off here, Rebecca, because this is just, there's so many words in here, and my listeners know that I'm really big on the words that you use. So I have to read this because this will crack you up. So the words that I pulled out of it. For Rebecca, you guys, meet Rebecca Undem, a speaker and coach for ambitious small-town women who want to live big without changing zip codes. Rebecca helps them find calm in the chaos of running a hectic household while pursuing a meaningful career. Sound familiar? I think so. So welcome, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you so much. I had so much fun when you came on my show, and I'm super thrilled to be here. And that was such I think that might be the most glowing review of my book ever. So my goodness, God. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm super humbled. Thank you.
Oh, that's so good. And the thing that I love about this paragraph is so many of the words: ambitious, check mark. Don't want to change zip codes? Yeah, check mark. I love my country roots. Finding calm in the chaos, check mark.
Right.
Hectic household, yeah, sometimes. And then you end it with the best thing is, I love the word pursuit. So pursuing a meaningful career, something that means something. So my gosh, if that doesn't tell you anybody, especially listeners, of her writing style, this paragraph will do that. So stay tuned. We got some fun questions for Rebecca. Okay, awesome. Rebecca, will you tell us where you are from and what your family looks like right now?
Yeah, so I live in a farming community in southeast North Dakota. It's called Oaks, Oakes. There's an E in there, even though all of our community name, our street names are all trees. So I really don't know I don't know if someone misspelled Oaks, like the trees, but anyway, that's the name of my town, Oaks, North Dakota. It's population under 2,000. And this was where I was born and raised. And then, as you know, in the book, I was gone for close to, a full decade, going to college and doing what I thought was going to be my whole life. And then we moved back, and I've been back now for 11 years. My husband farms my family's land. So that was an interesting development too. We came back to farm my family's farm. Mm-hmm. So, and my family now looks like when we moved back, it was just me and my husband, and now we have 3 kids. So my oldest son, Andrew, is 10. My middle son, Carter, is 8. And my bringing up the rear little girl is 5. Brynley is her name.
I didn't realize they were 10 and under. I thought you had a teenager in the group. So this is interesting.
No. Yep. Nope. They're young. They're young still.
Yes. And I have almost a 5-year-old as well. And are you having, side note, listeners, are you having a harder time? Well, she'll be 5 in a couple months, so she's not in kindergarten. But I have the hardest time thinking about her going to kindergarten. It's funny, obviously in the book, I talk about how brutal it felt when my oldest went, because I was pregnant. I was very pregnant with our daughter. Okay. And that was just, I absolutely was the mom, like crying. He walked out and he turned around and looked at me, and he just looked so small, just so small and so tiny. And then he turned around and he just walked out, and I was like, oh no, they're going to devour him. I felt, and I was very hormonal. So partly, that's part of it, but I am a very emotional person. So yeah, I definitely have those feelings right now. My daughter is in preschool. She's in preschool. It's full days, 3 days a week. And so I just keep thinking, like, I really have to cherish these days that she's home with me. And being an ambitious person, I've always struggled with that balance. I just think it's a big challenge if you're a person who wants to pursue work outside of that beautiful role of motherhood. And I've always felt that way. So, the imagining now her going, you just don't have that time. It's hard. Yeah, I definitely am having a hard time. Mm-hmm. I find myself lingering longer because I do, work from my home. So she works right next to me, but I find myself lingering for our lunch break, and we call it the game time break. And, yesterday we threw blueberries in each other's mouths, and I'm like, okay, that's good. That's a good plan, Becca. Set it up like a Hallmark movie so you make it really bad for yourself. Oh gosh, it's going to be difficult, but it will be good too. Because like you said, I also have value and exciting things outside of just motherhood that I am excited to be able to pursue without so many day commitments. But it's just I don't even know if I use the word difficult because I'm big on words too, but it's just a change that I might do it kicking and screaming.
Yeah. Well, I have this, one of my best friends has always said to me that she was never the mom to mourn these moments. She said, I'm always a what's next mom. That's how she described herself. She said, I get so excited for what they're going to get to do next. And I think that's a cool reframe.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of helps ease the mom heart a little bit because, ultimately that's our job, right? We're raising humans to release them out into the world. And so these things, as heart-wrenching as they can be, I guess, they're necessary steps for them to become who they were created to be. So
absolutely. Yeah. And we do have to, give them wings. Yes. I'm just going to give them a co-pilot, and that's me. So, okay. Well, thank you for sharing with us about your family a little bit.
Yeah.
So from the book, I kind of wanted to know what came first for you. Was it your podcast? And tell us a little bit about that, or was it the book?
Actually, I had embarked on the journey of becoming a speaker. And so I have to kind of clarify that a little bit. I was already a professional trainer by trade. That was what I did for work. I did communications training and leadership training, and companies would hire me to work with their employees. So that's just totally part of who I am. That feeling of like teaching, guiding, being up in front of a room, it's just totally my jam. And honestly, from birth, it's like who I was. And the only time I got off track was when I didn't listen to those signs, right? There's guideposts, I think, for all of us. And so I was already doing that, but I had this, especially with the move back home, there's not corporate headquarters in Oaks, North Dakota. So I was finding how do I do this work that I love and care about so much in a way that allows me to serve the people that are like the people I live with, versus always having to travel to the biggest city in North Dakota, which is Fargo, North Dakota, and go somewhere that runs so differently from my day-to-day life. I kind of felt like I was balancing these two parts of myself, like the hustle, get after it, ambitious Rebecca would put on a business suit and drive to Fargo and do her thing. And then my day-to-day life just looked so different from that. And I was trying to find a way to kind of marry those things so it didn't feel so, I don't know, like schizophrenic, like I have two totally different lives or something. And I'd met a speaking coach and got the chance to listen to her speak. And I just was like enamored with the way that she held us so captive with her storytelling. So I started working with her to basically transition this skill set into speaking. So I would have more of an opportunity to speak to women in small towns and, do that very thing. So that was what I had started to do. It was shortly after I was working with her. So I started working with her, investing in myself to learn really how to transition from, training with PowerPoints and step by step, like this is how you do the things, to being more of a storyteller. And it was in that process and working with her that she said, you should really think about writing a book. So that's how the book actually started. And oddly enough, I had a dream list that I had written years ago. Oh, yeah. And writing a book was on it. I had no idea what the book would be or, why or how. But yeah, so I think it was something always in the back of my mind, always kind of on my heart. And then in the process of working with this specific coach, it came to light.
Oh, that's awesome. I had the exact same thing. I had this bucket list that I hadn't run into for quite some time, and I'd made it shortly after we got married and found it when we moved from the old farmhouse to Grandma's farmhouse. And here it was, and it said, write a book. I'm like, yes, check mark.
Yeah.
Same thing. Okay, so then after you write the book, the podcast developed. How did that also come into play?
Yeah, so I don't know how many of your listeners are entrepreneurs, but I'm assuming there's a fair number of them, right, that are doing their own thing. And I'm going to speak to kind of some of the early struggles. It's like you start out and you think, okay, so content creation, I guess, is really where this came from. Like you have to create content if you have a business, and how do you share that? Is it a blog? Is it what's the medium? What's the mechanism? And so originally, How Mommy Got Her Groove Back was originally a blog. That's kind of how it pivoted. But for me, the podcast came about because the first thing I would just say, I have a mastermind group, a business mastermind group that these women are all over the country. Mm-hmm. And working with them, they really helped me. They just said, why are you not creating content that showcases who you actually are? They said, you're conversational. This is who, and also, if anybody wants to hire me as a speaker, all they have to do is listen to the podcast. They know exactly what they're going to get. They know, and I'm not the right fit for everybody, Rebecca. Like I know that. Sure. Obviously, right? We're not everybody's cup of tea, but if people that are looking for somebody that's just really honest and conversational, they would know what they're getting by listening to the podcast. So the podcast came about, it was about a year ago that I started thinking like, why am I not doing a podcast versus having something kind of one-dimensional, which is just my writing? I love writing too, but that was where it came about. And there's so many cool people that I get to visit with, you being one of them. Like, it's so much fun. It's so much fun, and I love it.
And it's such a great medium for
your voice style and your speaking style, especially since you are a speaker, that they can very quickly pick up on rhythms and conversational styles and story styles, and like, oh my gosh, this gal's so relatable. That was brilliant to start the podcast for that medium. That's amazing.
Well, and it's called the Small Town Big Talk Show. And obviously, like, anybody can find it on, all of the platforms. Yes. But that, I think you and I talked about this, that superficial conversation doesn't do anything for me. I realize that a lot of us think you have to do it to a degree, but I love to get into real conversation with people and do it quickly. And this show is called Small Town Big Talk for that very reason. So we can get on and talk about things that, that matter to people. And it's been one of my favorite things. It's so much fun.
One of my favorite things to ask people to get into deeper conversation with them than just the pleasantries, which believe me, guys, I'm trying not to sound like a bull in a china shop. I understand that there are pleasantries that have to be exchanged, but sometimes if I don't know them super well, but we are going to spend some time together, instead of asking, talking about the weather, or for whatever reason, a lot of people talk about alcohol. I'm like, what? I don't care how you take your drink. I don't understand. Not that I'm against it, but I don't understand how this is going to impact either one of us to know what we like to drink. So I always think, what are you working on? And so if I have a little bit more time, I'll say, so what are you working on right now? And it's fascinating because all you have to do is just listen, and they'll be like, oh, you know what? And I'm a big believer in you already know everybody you need to know. So all of a sudden you're opening up. They are opening up about these things that they may need to solve, that they're working on, and you may have the answer. Not that we are superior, but just that God placed you in their life in that moment to offer whatever that might be that you have learned or who you know. So I love the idea that your podcast gets to the meat of that, especially in a small town where it can be kind of what would be the word, catty and small talk and gossipy. So how do you raise yourself above that talk is by asking deeper questions like, hey, what are you working on? Now, as we're talking about the small towns, Rebecca, why do you think it is so important to live bigger than our zip code?
Oh, well, so anytime I think about answering this question, I want to tread lightly and obviously respectfully, because the last thing I want is to add to the idea that rural America is backwards, that we're not progressive, that nothing interesting or, innovative ever happens here. I just don't believe those things to be true. On the other hand, I do believe that because there's just fewer people to distract everybody from, it can be hard if you are an ambitious. And I use the word ambitious because I don't think ambition's a dirty word. I think, and again, if people, like, there are people that were meant to be on the earth, on the planet, to get a job and keep it for 40 years. There are people like that. And God bless them, and we need them, right? But when you're not wired that way and you feel like the majority of the people around you are, you can really feel like a fish out of water. And so those are the people I'm trying to reach with the message of just, you can live big in your small town. Your zip code doesn't have to define the size of your life, because we live in this amazing world where we're all connected. And so if those are things, those are ideals, or those are dreams you have for yourself, you don't have to shrink the size of your dreams to fit the size of the community you're living in. And it's going to be hard sometimes. Like, people aren't going to get you. That's 100% true. But and this is why I think, this is why we do things like this, like it's called the Encourager podcast that I'm talking on, right? It's to reach out and talk to that woman or man that's feeling like an outcast and saying, you're not crazy. You're just different. And that's totally okay. And it is something to celebrate. I also think those are the people that are going to keep rural America vibrant. You're the ones that are going to try new things and shake things up. And we need that. Every community, every group, every organization needs people like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially because we are the encouragers, to encourage that, even if it's something outside of the normal, encourage it. Ask them more questions like, oh my gosh, what made you think of that? What made you want to do that? Stop just stifling it because you don't think it will fit. It may be just the thing that needs to fit in that small town.
Right. And one of my core beliefs is that there is just latent, untapped potential throughout our small communities. And we just aren't doing a good enough job of asking those questions. I think one of the biggest things that holds us back in small towns is that we assume we know everybody and we assume we know everything about everybody. And we don't.
No.
I mean, you do. I do that in my own household, right? I mean, the closer a person is to us, the more we tend to assume we know. And that it's so sad because really we never fully, completely know another person. And we all change and we grow. So my husband, like how he responds to something today, he may not respond the same way tomorrow. And if I really want to know where he's coming from, I have to ask him questions. I think asking good questions is like the key to so much of our conflict, so much of our, you know, the challenges that we have, just asking and trying to understand where people are coming from.
Yes.
That's one of the things that I think in small towns it holds us back the most.
Yes. Oh, so good. That's so good. So you obviously have a super positive mindset on things, that you're not stuck in Oaks, North Dakota. You're thriving in Oaks, North Dakota. So obviously your mindset is bigger than just the size of the town and even the towns around it. But how has that influenced the reality of small town America? So how do you encourage those within Oaks and those that you speak to live, to have the same kind of mindset that you have about small town America and reversing it, that this is an incredible opportunity for you?
Well, I think outside of just continually saying these same things over and over, I really do take seriously that that we live by example. Even in my household, I can tell my kids, you are capable of anything. You can accomplish anything. But if I'm not living that way, they're only going to do what I show them. Because kids really aren't that good at listening. Modeling is it's about watching, right? So in wherever I go, I try to bring that positive energy to the groups that I'm a part of. And honestly, sometimes I get worn down. I mean, I get worn down too. We all do. But I think the biggest thing is that creating a network where I know that I'm not alone, having people that I can reach out to, that's what makes it sustainable when I sometimes don't feel supported in my hometown. And honestly, my hometown is amazing. I love it. I love it here. I love the people here. But that's what I do. It's become truly the way I choose to live and the way I choose to talk about it. Not everybody wants to see it that way.
Right.
But you said I'm not stuck. I'm not stuck here. And the biggest thing that I tell myself all the time is what I feel is my obligation and duty, which a lot of people don't even like that word, but I do think that it fits, is to create the things that I wish my community had instead of only complaining about what we're lacking.
Oh yeah.
There's
the big one.
I mean, I just think, if there's something that you want to do, something that you wish you had, what would a small version of that look like? And why don't you do it? We sit around waiting for somebody else to do everything. And my friend Joe Bartman from Dakota Resources, he said, you're the somebody that you've been waiting for. And that's like my favorite thing. Like, quit waiting around. No one else is going to do it. You know?
It's so good. It's so many things to take away from that too, Rebecca. Like you said, it's a choice. So you choose how you're going to react to things. You choose if you're going to stand on that board. I always say to the listeners, I'm a little bit strong about it too, is that you have to have actionable complaints, meaning go ahead and complain about it, get it off your chest, totally get it. But then at least have one step towards taking an action on that complaint. So I don't understand why we do not have a pool in town. It doesn't make any sense. We have this many kids and the municipal, they need, whatever your complaint is, okay, get it off your chest. Now take one action step towards it. Create a survey and release it to your zip code or whatever it is. But don't just complain, because then you do get in the stereotypical small town feel. But if you took action on it and just started a survey, is a great way to start it. Do a post on Facebook. That's not complaining, but being positive about whatever the change is that you think could happen. And it's like Rebecca said, you could be that somebody.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that Christian song when they talk about God in the end says, I created you, because you're asking like, why this and why this and why this, God? And why is this happening? And he's saying, I created you to go and solve that, to go and figure that out, to be the hands and feet of me. It's not always going to be my direct miracle on it. It's going to be working through you to get the miracle.
Yeah, it's stewardship. It's stewardship of the gifts and the talents and the skills that you have. And the things, I've said this so many times to people, that if there is a dream or something that's on your heart, it was given to you for a reason. And, you know, not everybody, like writing a book is a great example of that. Not everybody wants to write a book. And so if it was put on your heart to do that, then do it. Be a steward of that inspiration, be a steward of that dream. And I just think like that's to me, again, I think all of us have these beautiful gifts. And the biggest thing that we do is we shortchange ourselves by assuming we know like what people are. And everybody's full-time job, like the people that do have the 40-hour a week, you know, kind of set jobs, that's just what they do for their vocation. There might be a million reasons why they're choosing that, but they have all these other things that light them up, or all these other passions that they're capable of. And we don't know what those things are. And I just think, can you imagine what your community would look like if everybody was, okay, I'm getting so soapboxy here, and I'm sorry, but I really feel like
I love it.
Well, when people feel like they have a way to contribute those, that their time, their talents, their treasure, when people feel like they can contribute and they're good stewards of the things they've been given, it lends to a sense of belonging.
Yes.
And then when people feel like they belong, that's when your community feels like Mayberry. You know, I mean, that's the small town thing that we can achieve because we actually have that proximity to one another. It's way harder for big communities to accomplish what we're talking about because there's too many people and there's too many things vying for their attention. This, to me, it's like, I think the key to small town success is the people that already live there, not attracting the new thing from outside, but looking internally and saying, gosh, what if we did a gifts inventory? What would a gifts inventory of this community look like? And what could we accomplish if people were able to really tap into that?
Oh, it's so true. It's so good. Well, I will stand on the next step to your soapbox every day, Rebecca.
It's, you know, I get that then in like all of this sounds really great in theory, and like in reality, what does that look like? But it's thinking of small ways. Like you just said, maybe it is just throwing it out on Facebook and asking a question. Maybe it's when you sit down next to your fellow basketball mom, you ask 4 of them, you know, the question that's on your heart. We overcomplicate it a lot of times.
For sure.
By thinking it's got to be huge and big, and, you know, it doesn't.
I think it's one of those, my mom says this a lot, is like we overcomplicate it and we go to what the end result is. For example, Rebecca gets an idea, I'm going to write a book. She didn't even know at the time what it was going to be. Same with me. I wrote it down, no idea, but it was laid on my heart. But at the time, I wouldn't even have that language. I would just said, I'm going to write a book. I don't know why. I didn't know any of the details. So I didn't think through to the last thing. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. You just write down what's been laid down, and eventually the details will be revealed to you, or you'll start making the details because you'll start circling it. But the biggest obstacle to the complaining, if you're not doing anything about it, is that you're just overcomplicating it. Just start simply. Just make one step, one post, one question to the basketball mom next to you. Is like, have you ever thought about this? For example, we had some problems with our bus depot here. And I was sitting next to a mom during basketball practice. I was like, I don't understand this. And it was kind of a complaint, but kind of like, I do want some understanding. And she was like, oh, I called the bus barn and I figured out who the owner was and why this is happening. And all of a sudden, my world was so much larger and I felt so much more of the belonging, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was going on. So I actually felt sympathy for what was going on. And I also knew some things that some models that they could follow. Like, isn't this similar to like a city bus system? Like, there's another model here. Why have they not considered that? And she's like, I'm not sure, but we're probably missing something. We were humbled too, like, well, we've got to be missing something. But she said there's an open, I don't know what they would call it, an open forum or whatever, where you can go, open meeting, and you can suggest things and then they will reply back or whatever. And I thought, oh gosh, see right there, instead of going on and complaining about how it stinks, the bus system stinks or whatever, it was like, oh, actually we could make a difference if we appeared at the meeting. Like that's all you have to do, everybody.
Right. And you just touched on something that I think is so important too. We often are working with a very limited set of information about the things that we're seeing. Like we're only seeing what you think of how nuanced every single person's perception even of the same thing is, because we're all different people. I mean, just to start. But then, like you said, there's often things going on behind the scenes that if we were privy to, and maybe we won't be privy to, but if we ask the questions and they tell, like, whoever the they is, like if it's your school or, your government, your city council, any of those people, we have to put ourselves in the way of learning first. Like, instead of just judging the one thing that we see or the one way that we're perceiving it, we need to ask better questions. Again, it just goes back to asking questions, trying to understand the missing pieces and the things that we don't know, and then we can actually help one another. Yeah. But complaining about it rarely does any good. I mean,
oh my gosh, no,
honestly,
it just gets you in a rut. Just take one step towards whatever that is. And it's usually just asking, like you said, the right questions or any questions at all, but less on the complaining side and more on the solving side. How could we solve this together? Yeah.
Well, and I think just honestly, from a curiosity standpoint, saying, I want to understand the current situation, because a lot of times the problem isn't what we think it is.
Yes.
Right? There's other things going on, and the problem is deeper and more, again, nuanced than what we're seeing. So just actively listening and actively asking questions to better understand is such a great place to start.
Well, and I think it's also a trickle effect of, if you are questioning it, someone else has questioned it, or someone has a dream and they cannot realize that dream until the question has been posed to you and you start asking the question. So there was a need for a preschool in Valley Springs here. And there was plenty in a town, Brandon, that's just 15 miles from us. Like tons of selection. But I kept thinking, there is tons of families in Valley Springs that need a preschool. Why is there not a preschool in Valley Springs? So I submitted a survey to the zip code, and I asked the school if I could have permission to, put it in everybody's backpack, and they allowed it. And I got the questions back, and it turns out there was like 29 kids who could come if we could start this. Well, then I was like, what's my next move? So I asked the school board in Brandon, and they said, you got to go to the city of Valley and talk to them about it. So I did, and I learned so much more about cities. And by the way, everybody praise God if you are an entrepreneur and you don't have a bunch of red tape, because this lady was not meant for red tape. I was like, wait, what? I don't remember parliamentary procedure. What do we have to do? And when do I raise my hand? It was terrible.
Oh,
but
right.
I learned so much. And then what happened is somebody else in Valley Springs had always wanted to start a preschool and had it on their heart to start a preschool. And sure enough, they started a preschool, a church when looking for an area of ministry and mission work, basically. So they decided to host a preschool. So it answered all these questions, and mine was just a curious thing. And I didn't know that it was probably some power working ahead of me and above me saying, start asking questions. So it was completely outside of me, but it started with just like, I don't want to drive all the way into Brandon. I just want to drive into Valley. Surely I'm not the only one. And then starting the question. So as little as it is, think how many different dreams it fulfilled on its path.
Yep. It's a beautiful example. I mean, that is truly like a perfect example of what we're talking about. And, I get that not everything will go that smoothly. I totally get this. Like there are going to be gaps potentially in services, and there's going to be gaps in offerings in our rural communities. That is just kind of part of the deal. Like I've talked a lot about Shopco closing. I don't know. Did you guys have a Shopco in your community?
No, not in our community, but in Sioux Falls they did.
Yeah. So, just what losing that store felt like when it first happened. And sometimes we still feel it because it just left a gap. I mean, it left a gap in what we could easily get here. And now we're forced, for some of those things, you cannot get them here. And yet we're really fortunate. We've got a wonderful set of local business owners that have done a phenomenal job of trying to kind of backfill, but they can't do it all, No. And retail on the whole is just changing. So I think the world is changing in that respect.
Yes.
But I think, again, it just comes back to, okay, so that's an inevitable thing. Like everybody's dealing with that, even large communities. Sioux Falls is the largest community in South Dakota, isn't it?
Yes.
Sioux Falls. So they're going to be losing retail spaces too. So it's something we're all dealing with. And I just think, again, in small towns, we have this super cool opportunity to be more readily adaptable. We can respond more quickly because we're just smaller. And so it may not be like, so what would part-time preschool look like, or whatever the thing is that you want to fill in? It's like, figure out how to have it even once a month. And if it actually becomes something the community decides they want, that'll bear itself out, right? I mean, the demand for it will become clear, and the path forward for something more permanent will reveal itself.
And the other positive thing about that too is like a small town is quicker to rally together. Like, man, you put team spirit T-shirts out there and they're eaten up in the New York Minute because we are just really quick to rally around each other. Like, okay, this is our town, and the pride and the rallying aspect will move mountains in a small town before a big town can even have the third committee meeting on it. So think about how exciting it is to have a smaller group of people because they can move quicker. They're more agile.
Absolutely. And the other thing, it just made me think of this, that I love about the idea of small towns is, investing in one person in a small town has a huge ripple effect because we're involved in lots of things in our small towns. So when I think about innovation, is something I think about a lot. Like it's a kind of a fancy word, but it basically just means creatively problem solving, right? Creative problem solving. Sometimes I think we get really stuck in the way that we think about how to approach things. And it's not because we're backward, and it's not because we're too traditional. It's because it's all we know. So when we say this is the way we've always done it, it's because that's true. And I know people really don't care for that phrase. And it's one too where I hear it, I'm just like, but that doesn't mean it's how we should do it, right? So, but to challenge that takes time, and it's hard. People don't know what they don't know. But when we can unlock the way we think about approaching challenges or solving problems, and you think about doing that even just for one person. If that person's on their church board, if that person has a family, if that person works somewhere or has a business, all three of those places are positively impacted by their development.
Yes.
It's incredible how much investing in people can ripple out for the betterment of the community, because our hands are on lots of things in small towns. And I just think that, again, too, is another big differentiator from larger communities. It's like the ROI is bigger. A dollar invested in people spreads further and faster.
Yeah, so that's a great way of putting it. That's an excellent way of putting it. Oh, well, this has been so encouraging, if I dare say so, because it just allows us to think, outside of our zip code, think larger. And, a going theme between this language was just small steps. You don't have to think it all the way to the end. Stop the complaining and start the solving. Think through what kind of changes you can make and what kind of platforms you need to spread your message. Maybe it's a podcast. Maybe it's the book that you've always wanted to write. Maybe it's a blog. Whatever that looks like, just start small. Take that first step, and there are loads of people within your small town that will rally behind you, support you, and help you get to whatever it is you're trying to get to.
Exactly.
Awesome. Rebecca, how do our listeners follow you, give us your podcast? I know you're still blogging, and access to your book, or anything you would like to share with our encouragers.
Yeah, so my main website is just RebeccaUndem.com, my first name, last name.com. And there you'll find information about my speaking. My book is linked there. And then the talk show is linked there as well. And the podcast is called, again, the Small Town Big Talk Show. And you can find that basically anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcast. So as always, I always ask that if you actually do love it, take time to review it. I know it's not something that, I know it's not something that we naturally kind of do, but it really is shocking how few podcasts are dedicated to rural life. There really aren't that many out there. I've looked, I've tried to find them. And so it helps more of the people that need it find it if more of us rate and review it. So.
Absolutely. And we will put all of her information in the show notes, listeners, so you can be sure to grab all of that. And then tell us a little bit, Rebecca, before we end here, about your weekend, I believe, that you do for women.
Oh, yeah. So this is really a particular offer that I created about a year ago. And it's the idea of hosting a women's event in your small town. So you can do it at any time. It doesn't have to be a weekend. Okay. But it's like a 3-hour event. And I painstakingly went through the process of really trying to help a community that would want to do this pull it off. Because if I know one thing about small towns, it's that your businesses get tapped a lot for sponsorship and support for all the things. And sometimes it can just feel like way too daunting of a task to pull it off. So I provide like templates, and I provide the email scripts and the news release scripts. I try to give the host for their community, I try to give them everything they'll need to host a successful women's event. And a lot of women, a lot of our communities have women's groups already, and they don't even need all of that. But we still can customize what that event might look like for your town. So I love those conversations. The conversations don't cost anything. Like, reach out to me. You know, if women's programming is something that you want in your small town, then let's talk, because it's my favorite. It's my favorite thing to do. So yeah, they can just reach out to me on my website, and we'll schedule a time to chat about it.
Oh, fun. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rebecca. Can you leave our listeners with some encouragement?
This has kind of become my mantra and my tagline, but I just always want to encourage people to remember that the size of their life is not determined by their zip code.
It's so good. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Until next time, encouragers, we got this.
I know how you can start executing on all the things that God has equipped you to do. You can pick up my book at theencouragerpodcast.com and check out the store complete with book, journal, and the master course. Also, make sure to check out the resources tab where you'll get a hold of all the PDFs from the podcast. Thank you for tuning in, encouragers. Remember to subscribe so it's automatically on your phone. And please rate and review me. We got this, encouragers.